Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey has unveiled what must be the most extreme gun control proposal to come from any Democratic candidate in 2 decades, maybe 3. As well as the usual items, the banning of standard capacity magazines, which are called high capacity magazines, the banning of the most commonly owned rifle in America, which is called an assault weapon, and federal oversight over all firearms transfers, even private transfers within the same state, Booker wants to set up a federal registry. This registry would contain information about every single gun owned privately in the United States. That's 500 million of them. It would also contain information about every single gun owner in the United States. Indeed, to be or stay a gun owner, Americans would have to apply to Washington for a new federal license, not just once, but every 5 years. If they were granted that license, their name would be placed into the database, so the government knew who they were, what they owned, and where they could be found. This is a bad idea. Quite clearly, databases give government power over the citizenry. Don't believe me? Just look at Venezuela. In Venezuela, the government, which has become a dictatorship, disarmed the people it disliked, and it knew where to find them because of the National Registry. Now, presumably, Cory Booker would say that's not his intention, that's an alarmist thing to say, or to worry about. But Cory Booker knows full well how useful databases and lists are, because as part of the same proposal, he has suggested that any American whose name is on the terror watch list should be prevented from exercising his or her Second Amendment rights. Now, the terror watch list, remember, is not a list of Americans or foreign nationals who've been convicted of anything. It's not even a list of Americans or foreign nationals who've been charged with anything or arrested. It is a list, a private list kept by the federal government of people who are, for various reasons, suspected of being shady characters. Cory Booker wants to use that list to deprive almost 1 million people of their Second Amendment rights. He knows full well how useful databases are. That aside, gun registries aren't actually very useful in the first place. Canada, which launched a long gun registry in 2003, had abandoned it 9 years later. That registry had failed to help solve a single crime. It also cost a hell of a lot more than it was supposed to. The promise was it would cost no more than 2 million Canadian dollars per year. It ended up costing 2.7 billion with a B Canadian dollars per year. It was abandoned, it was costly, and it wasn't doing anything. We've seen similar stories in New Zealand and in the States. Gun control advocates like registries for some reason, but they can never actually point to anything concrete that has been achieved as a result of a registry. They don't help in crimes, they divert resources away from tools that do. It's also pretty difficult in America to get a registry to work. Americans tend to resist, as we've seen in New Jersey, as we've seen in Connecticut, as we've seen in California. The compliance rate is extremely low, sometimes hovering around 0. There are 500 million guns in the United States, which makes that something of a problem. And even worse, for the registry advocates, the Supreme Court has ruled out the use of registries as an effective tool, even if they did work. There's a case from 1968, Haynes v. United States, which holds that those who are not allowed by law to own firearms cannot be prosecuted if they fail to register the firearms they illegally own. To ask them to register is a form of self-incrimination, which is prohibited under the Fifth Amendment. So whatever problems exist with gun registries in general are made much, much worse in the United States by a set of cultural and legal norms that Cory Booker thinks he can just blow right through. Guns are a constitutionally protected tool. The right to self-defense is enumerated within the Bill of Rights. Comparisons with other items, cars for example, simply won't cut it. What Cory Booker is requesting is a list of people who are exercising their constitutional rights, rights that have been upheld and recognized by the Supreme Court and that have been upheld and recognized by pretty much every state, 45 out of the 50 as well. Hopefully, if this bill ever became a bill and was ever introduced into Congress, it would be dead on arrival. But it's worth doing the work now to make sure that those in Washington who think this is a good idea are disabused swiftly of that notion.